Here. Got it.
Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. Today's guest and I have a lot in common. We both love to run our mouths. We both host our own podcasts. We're both incredibly good looking, as you can see. and unfortunately, we've both also been incarcerated. Of course, there's a big difference in that whereas I was guilty, Reece was ultimately exonerated, not guilty, but nonetheless, time in the big house is time in the big house. Welcome, Reece, on the radio.
Thank you, man. Lebo, it is a pleasure to be here, and thank you for asking me. I would have never even expected you to ask me, so I was a little surprised when you did.
Oh, are you kidding me? I have to ask you.
Well, I appreciate it.
A man of your conversational stature, I got to get you on over here.
That's nice of you to put. I consider myself just a big mouth, man. I'm just that's who I don't think I'm of myself as an intellectual, a conversationalist. I'm just a big mouth. And in the famous words of the movie Network, I'd like to consider myself a person pointing out the hypocrisies of the world.
Mad as hell and not going to take it anymore.
Well, no, I'm not mad as hell and not going to take it anymore, but I just want to kind of just the stuff that doesn't make sense to me, that just seems fishy. I just want to point that out and sort of rationalize it, because I think sometimes we're sort of presented things that we're supposed to just take and just believe. And for some reason, my curious mind, since I was a kid, always said, wait a minute, that just doesn't seem right. And I can't sort of shake the uncomfortable feeling that I have with it. I call it as Bruce Willis put it in a movie called Lucky Number 11, the Kansas City Shuffle. When everybody's looking left, look right, because that's usually where the rub is. Like that's where they're trying to get you. And if everyone's looking in one direction, I always tend to say, wow, everybody's looking up. Maybe I should look somewhere else. I won't believe the hype.
All right. So you would consider yourself, correct me if I'm wrong, a Reagan conservative, correct?
That is exactly what I consider myself.
So something that's always, well, I don't know about always, but for a long time has bugged me about most conservatives is they have a intense distrust of government. And I think that's warranted. Very suspicious of government, don't trust bureaucracies to get things done, don't trust labor unions. But when it comes to the correctional system, it just seems like conservatives, much like with the police, that big backers, they somehow think that the rules don't apply to law enforcement. And I don't, first of all, have you had the same experience?
When you say the rules don't apply to law enforcement,
what I mean by that, the rules of government not being a functional organization. Conservatives seem to think that the rules of government incompetence and government corruption that they uphold, that they believe, but they don't seem to think that those same things apply when it comes to law enforcement, i.e. corrections, the police. Recently, they've come to distrust the FBI, but
Right. No, they should apply to all forms of government. Right. And I believe that this is, I don't believe in changing the rules, if you will, for certain factors of the government to adhere a certain ideal, right? There's got to be a uniform way in which we deal with government in all. In other words, nobody in government should have more power than anyone else, nor should they have less. That being said, when it comes to the police, and this is true in everything, we have to stop incentivizing government law enforcement apparatuses. And that's from the FBI all the way down to the county a sheriff, so to speak, right? We got to stop telling those people that if you do this, we'll incentivize you, because human beings are human beings. If you tell the police officers you got to do what's called a 20-in-1, right? You have to have 20 tickets and 1 arrest every month. That's incentivizing law enforcement. That means they're not doing their job based upon the criteria. Like, in other words, the necessity for law enforcement should meet the need for law enforcement, not forcing the issue to meet a criteria, right? That's what I believe in law enforcement. We got to stop turning law enforcement and government also into a business. And that's where we are today in all forms of government. We're turning it into these quotas and measurements, so to speak. And they're no longer just doing their job. Guess what? A police department should be able to function even if there's less crime in it, right? It can't be a mayor going, you guys aren't making enough dog walking tickets. You don't have enough, jaywalking tickets. We can't have a law enforcement that operates like that. It's got to be, hey, listen, Smitty, you don't have enough arrests this month. I'm sorry, boss. There just people aren't doing any crimes out there.
Yeah.
And the guy's job shouldn't be in jeopardy, because of it. Now, if we've got more reports of crime and Smitty's not doing his job, that's a separate thing. But you know what I mean? It's got to be an honest effort by the people in charge instead of forcing the issue. And that's where I mean changing it from doing your job to incentivizing your job.
I couldn't agree more. So what I want to do, Reece, is I want to compare and contrast your experience behind bars and mine, because you were, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were incarcerated in New York in Rikers Island, which is a pretrial facility, correct?
That is correct.
So, and how long were you in for?
2 years, 5 months exactly. And I went from the Rikers Island facility in Queens, New Haven, New York, and the Manhattan correctional facility, just to the left of where Donald Trump was arraigned on Tuesday, which is literally like, walking distance. The beauty of it is I wish I would have stayed in the Manhattan correctional facility, but I had been punished so many times. They sent me to Rikers Island, where I had to get up early for my court cases every time I had to go to court. So they would make me get up really, really early. So as a punishment, they would put me on Rikers Island. So I spent the 2.5 years or 2 years and 5 months between both facilities, a majority of which was on Rikers Island.
So I've obviously, I had to spend some time in pretrial facilities, and then I spent the vast majority of my time in what would be called prisons or penitentiaries, for long-term inmates. But I believe that when it comes to government, there's principles involved. So I think that there's going to be commonalities between your experience and my experience, and I would just like to investigate them. So when you're in Rikers Island, what is the average day consist of for the inmate population? What are they doing? Are they studying? Are they educating themselves, doing programs? Like, what's going on all day at Rikers?
So let me start by saying, on Rikers Island, there's a terminology, and you might be familiar with it, but I learned it, of course, there, having never been incarcerated until I was on Rikers Island. They had a term called jailing when you were there. Did they use that term for you? Okay,
so you got to know how to jail. You got to know how to do.
You got to know how to jail.
Yes.
All right. For those of you who do not understand that, is that there are protocols, there are rules, there are unwritten and regulations, if you will, and they are not just between the inmates or the people being held there for pretrial. This is also within your relationship with the correction officers as well. And jailing could be a myriad of things for the individual, right? Sit by yourself, find some way to occupy your time by playing chess or checkers all day, or spades, whatever that is, reading over your case material, if you had that on there, reading books or borrowing books from certain people, doing other things like having, chit chat and conversation, and of course, watching television. And even those things are routine. From Monday through Friday, there is a set amount of television that you watch, but the programming was set by the unit you're in. So you have the separate cell people who are sitting in separate cells, and then you have what's called the dorm atmosphere in the Manhattan facility. In the Rikers Island facilities. So the dorm was, imagine 30 to 60 men in one place with a whole bunch of cots, and they have a TV room. So that particular jailing, if you will, is you wake up, you sit by your bed, maybe you'll make up your bed, you'll Do a morning prayer if you're into that. Read a book. If you read a book, go get breakfast. If you go get breakfast, get ready to make your phone calls, and then sit back and then start your daily conversations with whatever. Maybe even do your laundry, your hand wash your laundry. TV rooms on, you go there. And at the time that I was there, it was always the Maury Povich show, and then off to your Jerry Springers and your Steve Wykos and whatever that was. And then that would be, TV would be cut off for that, and then you're off to lunch, and then the same routine would go on and on. So it was sort of the same routine, but everyone had a certain set of their own individual routines. There was a lot of individualism inside the jail system, but it was just within the confines. But you just define it, do the thing that gets you through the day until you got into sort of the end of the night, and then go to bed and then do it all over again. Oddly enough, you know what my routine was every day? I woke up in the morning, listened to the morning radio shows, then watched a little television, and then when noon came on, it was Rush Limbaugh, then Sean Hannity, and then Mark Levin. And then by the nighttime came, I was off to bed.
See, in my view, those shows should be absolutely banned in prison.
Really?
You shouldn't be. No, I'm just kidding. No, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
No.
And you had the, you had the little Walkman sort of deal too. So if you had to buy those.
So that is what you just described has been my experience as well. But in my experience, like, as you just said, this is, some inmates do this, some inmates do that, and it's true. But the overwhelming majority are not doing the book reading or the legal studies. They're watching your Jerry Springer, Maury Povich, or playing games. Was it the same there, where most inmates on a daily basis are just basically playing, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, there was a lot of trying to find things to distract them. And there was a lot less of the reading and a lot more of the television watching, the mind-numbing television watching, to just get them through the whole situation of being locked up. So your escapism, if you will, and I think most people who are incarcerated gravitate towards escapism more than anything because of their situation. Television was the means in which to do that. So if you had a radio, you would escape there by listening to, in my case, Hot 97 or one of the R&B stations for the older guys. And for me, it was talk radio. Talk radio helped me get away from, thank God for Rush Limbaugh. I say this, he will always be my hero, primarily for this time, because Rush Limbaugh made me feel like I was out in the world fighting against Barack Obama every day. So that was, being there and sort of feeling, shackled, figuratively and literally. Rush Limbaugh was letting me know what was happening outside of the world that I was no longer a part of. And that was my escapism.
So in every prison I've ever been in, every jail I've ever been in, it's noisy as hell. Some worse than others, some, but there's usually things that'll spark arguments, card games, chess games, basketball. They're playing basketball, or they're arguing over sports, the Celtics, whatever. Was it the same there?
Yeah, fighting it's an interesting thing in Rikers Island, and also at the Manhattan detention center, which is what it was called, MDC. Fighting could really be broken down to the need for human interaction, because it would be the most frivolous stuff. It's like, I didn't understand how frivolous it was, but I guess people, a woman, a corrections officer said it to me. She goes, sometimes people need to grab onto something or to hold onto something or feel alive. And people who have no sort of, what's the term I'm looking for? With no release. They have no release. They were using fighting as a means to get out tension because they didn't have anything else. You go into your dorm room and sort of, take care of yourself, so to speak, physically, or you actually had to get into a fight with someone so you felt like you were alive, or you had something to do. Or you had an anxiety about the case or the situation you were going in, and you needed to take it out on someone. So the most meaningless thing would get you into a fight, like a spades game, a domino game, something like that. Whatever it was, it would trigger you off so easily. because you needed some sort of release or some sort of human interaction you weren't getting otherwise. There were some people who took advantage of that, and there were others who just couldn't be bothered, so to speak. Like they really would just leave the situation because either it would affect their pending trial or pending situation.
Yeah.
They would usually just, because they know they're in pretrial, anything that they did in it was detrimental was going to be detrimental to their case. So it's very, very low key on the fighting stuff.
Not nearly as much as what people think. Like people that are out in society, it's far more common in my experience are shouting matches than fisticuffs.
Well, I got into a couple of those, and it's funny because having never been in that situation, right? So this is my first time locked up. I'm there 2 years, 5 months. I've had 3 instances that almost led to fights. Only one time did I ever have to raise my hands to a guy, and it was I knew the guy didn't want to fight. And I think I took advantage of him knowing that he didn't want to fight. So I really provoked him into the situation where he wanted to meet me like down in some sort of dark corner of the detention center. And I literally goaded him into it to find out what he was made of. But it was probably the darkest moment that I was ever in, because I was at a point where I was sort of like, I'm going to be here forever. And I had literally let jailing take a hold of me mentally. And I was sick and tired of playing the goody two shoes role and people getting the impression that I could be or was to be trifled with. And I got done with that. And my ego started to really get involved. And at that point, I started to sort of strut myself and says, I've been here a long time. It's about time I take advantage of this situation and start ruling the roost. But that was all ego. But I think that in that moment when I realized that I had actually become a jailed individual, I had to take a hard look at myself. And then I went in the other direction.
I want to come back to that because there's something I want to talk about. But I wanted to tell you, so the 4 principles of correction are incapacitation, punishment, deterrence, rehabilitation. That's what corrections is supposed to do. So really, you're supposed to remove dangerous individuals from the street, provide them with an environment that's uncomfortable enough to act as a deterrent and to motivate rehabilitation. What I have argued is that corrections, all it does effectively is incapacitate. Now, when I say that, people say, oh, you don't think it's a punishment? Of course, it's a punishment to be taken off the street and locked up. That's indisputable. But when I use the term punishment, I'm thinking of an effective punishment that is designed to alter behavior so that your bad behavior is punished, your good behavior is rewarded, and so you're headed in the right direction. But prison doesn't do that. And guys basically go to prison and live like they lived on the street, but without women. And the idea that you're going to take, thousands of criminals. I mean, in your case, it's different. I get it because you didn't do the crime, but most guys do. Most guys in jail have done the crime, right? So you're taking a lot of criminals, putting them in one area together and just allowing them to every day, like you said, do watching Jerry Springer, Maury Povich, playing chess, poker, whatever. That's just not conducive to what society expects. So when I complain about the system, people will often say to me, oh, but what do you think? It should just be a camp? No, not at all. I think there should actually be accountability, but there is none. Now, I want to dial back to the moment that you were talking about where you put your hands up and you had enough. And I've seen that so many times. And the thing is this, this is where it comes down to the correctional officers. So the correctional officers at Rikers, were they like the correctional officers I know, where basically they're just standoffish? They don't write many tickets. They're not enforcing many rules. Usually if they do, it's because they don't like somebody, or if it's just so blatant that they have to. That's been my experience with rule enforcement with the correctional officers.
Imagine a babysitter with a badge. That was Rikers Island. And I say that sadly because that is the attitude brought to the job.
Yes.
They know these individuals are not criminals in the sense of they've not been convicted of a crime, right? So you don't have to treat them as such. Many of them, they know, may be innocent of their crime, may not end up in the prison system. Some of them believe that they are, this guy's so bad. You know, it's like having the neighborhood Miss Mary who sits outside of her perch talking about, you know, you're going to go to jail one day. That's the attitude that they have towards the people who are locked up because they see them every day. So they've got their favorites. They've got their, you know, ones that they're not too fond of. But inside their job, they're walking in knowing that they're supposed to hand out razors. They're supposed to call people when it's time for them to go to court, maybe time for them to go see their lawyer. In essence, it's a babysitting gig. And many corrections officers told me that. In the situation with me, with that moment where I had actually went put my hands up, which I could have avoided. And I knew I could have avoided, but I literally kept pushing the envelope. The correction officer who was in there knew that I wasn't the guy who started trouble. I wasn't. In fact, they laughed at my jokes and was very nice to me all the time with regular conversations. At that moment, when I called the guy into the corner, they did nothing, the corrections officer. They did nothing. They let it happen when I called them back. And I just kind of gave them a wink and a nod and just said, you know, let us go back here and do this. Is that all right? If it gets a little hectic, somebody will be there, you know, to call you if it's necessary. But, you know, it doesn't. And their attitude was, go on about your business. So they really never took their job as if they were there to deter or to stop some sort of fracas that might go on. They're there to literally push a button. If it gets into a riot, I push a button and move out the way. So it was a little weird, but that's where they were.
See, the attitude of the correctional officer that says to you or basically lets you go into the corner to fight, even though he knows he's not supposed to, that's the same attitude that gets you into the position where you feel you have to fight. And let me explain to you. I know what it's like to be in prison trying to do the right thing. When you day in and day out are trying to do the right thing and are often punished for it, not intentionally, but it's just the way it happens. But you are constantly seeing guys getting away with raising hell, or in many cases being rewarded from their bad behavior. And what I mean by that is this: the guy sneaks out of the cell when he's not supposed to. The CO sees him, doesn't write him up. He's being rewarded for his bad behavior. You know, I always tell the story. My cellmate and I, we would come back from work and you were supposed to get on a shower list. So we would get on the shower list. Nobody else would. So what would end up happening is the two guys that do what they're supposed to get screwed out of the shower. But when you do what you're not supposed to, you get the shower. And then, by the way, plus they would just go and hang out, play dominoes when they weren't supposed to anyways. So now I you know, apply that to your situation. You're in a situation where you know you're in prison. You didn't do what you're accused of, right? Guys, I'm imagining keep screwing with you. Nobody's putting a stop to it. Nobody. The correction officers are allowing it to happen. So at that point in your mind, you've got to start thinking, what is the point of not fighting? I mean, even if I could bang this guy up in the corner, I'm not going to get in trouble, or I could just keep letting guys bully me and no one's going to do anything about it. And all of a sudden it comes back to the incentives that you talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. What are you incentivized to do in that situation?
Right.
And I'm glad you said what you said, that it was on you, because I'm in no way exonerating anybody for their behavior. Right. You could have walked away from the fight. You could have done the right thing, regardless of the environment you were in. But certain environments are more conducive to doing the right thing and some are less. And just as the offender population needs to be held accountable, so ought to be the people who are there getting paid by taxpayers to do a job. That's my view of it.
No, you're 100% right. If I could, can I elaborate a little bit on something you said?
Sure.
That happened. We'd be talking about rewarding good or not rewarding good behavior.
Sure.
You really sparked something in me that I was telling my wife about a situation that happened. So one night when it was really, there was nothing going on, there was no television to watch. I think it was a holiday of some sort, but everyone's in there in essence. Every day it ends in a Y. It's no Christmas, it's no New Year's, it's nothing. It's just a day when you're inside. And of course it can't be. But there was this one day when it was just dead. And this one day in my head, I said, wouldn't it be cool if I got people interested in some form of educational entertainment? And so with another guy, I devised a trivia game for the guys in the dorm. And I told them that the prize would be your buy-in. So everybody had to buy in with $2 worth of commissary, right? And the winner, who had the most points at the end of the trivia game, sort of like a whole trivia board game, the winner would get all of what was in the commissary. So we keep it fair. Everybody had to answer the questions that were on there, and they were all based on sports and like sports, entertainment, different categories, and they were all went in rounds. Anyway, so a bunch of guys participated in this inside the dorm. So you're thinking 60 guys. We had at least 30 guys in on this game. And they came in, and at the end of it, everybody was counting up their points, but the guys were literally high-fiving each other when they were getting the questions right. And of course, you got a young group of Black and Latino kids who are being rewarded for their intelligence. I knew that would spark something in them. In my heart of hearts, that's what I wanted, and I needed them to see that in themselves. And it was such a good feeling. Well, we did the contest. Everything was over. A guy won. No one was angry or anything else. Good game, everybody. The next morning, I'm sitting at a table eating breakfast, and about 15 to 20 kids come up to me where I'm sitting by myself, maybe with 2 or 3 guys next to me, but a group of kids standing around me. They're all standing at the table while I'm eating, and they're asking me, "Hey, when can we do that game again? Can you come up with a bunch of new questions?" And as I'm eating, I'm like, yeah, sure. So the moment that I'm talking to them, a captain of the corrections officer comes in behind me with the corrections officer. And she only sees me sitting and these group of kids surrounding me, talking to me, asking, "Hey, can we do that again? Blah, blah, blah." And the captain looks at me and says, "Hey, what's going on here?" And I said, we did a trivia game for some of the young men. They were, sort of testing their educational prowess on some of the questions that I doled out for them. And they were like, yeah. And the kids were like, they was like, yeah, it was really, really fun. He was like, it's like, I didn't even realize that I was that smart and all this stuff that I was, and they were literally praising the idea that we were doing something. They were doing something productive. I thought that the captain, looking at the captain's face, I'm going, God, that's got to be good, right? Like seeing these kids do that. He's a young 20-year-old something. Anyway, everybody has to go back to their cell as they do in the middle of the day for the change of the shift. In the middle of nothing, I hear, "Hopkins." I look down from my cell and I was like, "What? What's going on?" "You're getting moved." So I come down, they like, "Pack up, you're getting moved." I'm like, "What?" Start packing up. I come downstairs. The corrections officer, who I happen to know, she says, "You should have never let the captain see you surrounded like that with those kids." And I'm like, "What?" And they were like, "You look like you were in charge of something." And I'm like, what do you mean? Like in charge of something? She said, "It made you look like a mob boss and you had minions." And I like, literally my head blew up. I was just like, I've never had that kind of corrupt bone in my body. Like I just felt so, I guess the accusation made me felt violated, because I was like, I'm already in here accused of a crime I didn't commit. Here's another one. Me being accused of something that I had no intention of doing. I thought I was doing something good, but I was being moved for it. They were being deprived of an opportunity to really like believe in themselves. They were snatching that away from them. It was the most ungodly thing I ever saw in my entire life. And it really made me angry. Like when I say it made me angry, it was like by the way, I've been moved at least 9 times in 2.5 years. Every time I was moved, they have a person who's considered the dorm representative, a dorm rep. Out of the 9 times I've been moved, Michael, I was the dorm rep every time I got to the new dorm. They made me the dorm rep, which in essence is sort of like being a part of the Senate. They made me the dorm rep. My nickname inside Rikers Island was Politics. That's how I was notoriously known as. "Oh, Politic, yeah, that Politic man. That's what I was known as." So to see that people would like, if representing anything or calling out things that just didn't seem right, I was punished for it every time. And I never got that. I said this when I finally got home. I said, I didn't learn how to be a criminal until I got locked up because it was the most corrupt place in the world. It's like if you, when you were saying that about the, sort of like the improvement of the individual who's in there incarcerated and supposed to be rehabilitated, there's no interest in that whatsoever. It's literally the objective of the whole place is to beat the guy down so badly that, and I learned this, especially when it comes to young men who don't have the education, the wherewithal, or the belief. The objective is to put them in that hellhole, beat them down until they take a deal just to get it over with. Yes, yes, boss, you beat me to submission. And I just refused. When I saw that, something in me just said, I can't let these guys win. That's what their objective is to do, is to beat me down until I give up. I just wouldn't do it. Sorry, it sounded like a long thing, but I apologize.
No. Listen, I want to hash out the principles. I want people to understand what these places are like, what is going on inside of there. And, the thing is this, I want to shine light on the prison system. The prison system is a big failure. So the more people that can tell their experiences, and the problem is most people, like, you're articulate, so you understand how to explain what's going on. You understand, okay, these young kids, they're being rewarded for the first time because of their intelligence, and then that's ripped away from them. But the kid, all he experiences is anger. He doesn't know how to explain it. So that's why I love the story, because you were able to explain to people what was going on, to put it into words.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask me, well, because I'm obviously the people watching know, and I'm a libertarian, and people say, well, what, gave rise to this? And, a lot of reading for sure, but also my day-to-day experience of dealing with a government bureaucracy that is the prison system taught me there's no way in hell I want these people in charge of important things. Or to put it a little bit differently, they should be in charge of as little as absolutely possible.
Agreed.
Because it's just, guards sleeping on the job, guards talking about how they're having sex with the female guards, or smuggling stuff in, whatever it is, on a day-to-day basis. You got guys slamming cards, slamming dominoes, gambling in plain sight. Nothing gets said to them, but maybe you got a bunch of guys standing around a door reading, together, and now they come in, they'll say something about that, and there's just no rhyme or reason for it. You can't make heads or tails of it from one day to the next, and it's such a frustrating experience. And it's just why I'm very happy that you shared that. That was great. So you were a conservative in the Reagan vein prior to going in, correct?
Yes.
So what would you say, like, was your small government ideology reinforced by what you experienced in there as mine was?
Wow. And this is probably going to be the most embarrassing thing I have to admit about the criminal justice system. My extreme naivete to it before. I was of the ilk. Let me preface by saying this. Liberals are right about one thing when it comes to me in the sense of the criminal justice system. Liberals have often said Republicans don't care about nothing until it happens to them. Guilty. Because with the criminal justice system for me before I got locked up was, well, if they were in there, they must have done something. That was my view until I got locked up for something I didn't do. And then met people who had actually done what they were locked up for and people who had not. And to meet those people and to understand their stories, to actually have an awakening to what it was like and why the individuals who lock you up do it, and the people who are there while you're in the system, why they do what they do. That understanding, getting behind the curtain, changed everything that I ever knew. And I was already a small government guy, but I was very limited in my scope of it. It was, when I thought of smaller government, I was thinking Washington, because I was, again, my naivete. It's the Washington. Now, sure, I talked about local government to a lot of people I would discuss. It was like, listen, all government is small. All government is local. All activism with government is local, and then you work your way up. It wasn't that I didn't deal with the local government aspect of it, but Washington was sort of the big fish that everyone gravitates to. And as a talk show host and being in radio, it's what everyone's talking about, but you miss the small nuance. It was my first time dealing with a Manhattan DA. Cy Vance, by the way, came to my trial. That's how interested he was in this story, because I was viewed as a neocon that was the most reviled political party in New York City. That was what they said in court. That's on the transcript. That was the reason why I was being treated the way that I was, because of a neocon who's the most reviled, involved in the most vile political party in New York City, that I was being treated in the manner that I was. Cy Vance came there to pretty much punish me himself. Looking at that gave me an understanding of why government is such government in any aspect is corrupt, in the sense of when it uses its people for its own personal gain. And I believe government is not working, or doesn't work in the realm of making life better for the individual. It believes in dictating a better life for the individual. And in doing so, it hashes out punishments and rewards for who they want to hand out punishments and rewards. Whoever their enemies are, they will treat like enemies, and whoever is subservient to them, they will treat like heroes. And I didn't learn what that was like until I had to deal with it as far as the district attorneys and the police departments, especially with my arresting officer, and how they get corrupted into all of this nonsense. I didn't learn about that until I got into Rikers Island and understood exactly, seeing those people one-on-one, dealing with them one-on-one, and exactly how absolute power corrupts absolutely, from Washington to Main Street. That's just who it is. And that's just a long answer to a pretty simple question, but that's how I got to where I am today. I needed that 2 years and 5 months to be in the place that I am today.
Not too long of a story at all, Reece. Great. That's what I want people to hear. Well, we're out of time, Reece, unfortunately. But first of all, I want you to come back. So okay. You have an invitation to come back. Secondly, where can people find you?
Always go to ReeceOnTheRadio.com. That's ReeceOnTheRadio.com for the Reece on the Radio Rundown, 8 p.m. Eastern. And also, I'm very, very happy to announce that starting on May 14th and every Sunday that doesn't have a Boston Red Sox game, I'll be on WTIC. The Reece on the Radio Rundown will be at 1 p.m. on WTIC on Sundays. Again, barring that there isn't a Red Sox game happening, because more than likely there will be. But you can find the show there as well.
Well, I'll be listening, and I hope other people will as well.
And listen, I expect you to be on that show too. So,
no
you're
doubt.
Everywhere. You are everywhere. If I can say this before we go, dude, listen to me. Hands down, the most, how do I say it? Tenacious person I've ever met in my entire life is you. You go from, it hasn't been 6 months. Has it been 6 months yet?
4 months.
4 months, my
friend. A little more than 4 months. 4 months than 2 weeks.
You are everywhere. You didn't let one bit of that 4 months stop you from doing what you're doing right now. And it's almost like watching you do this is amazement. You encourage me, dude. I literally look lazy to compare to you, because you are everywhere. I'm telling you, sometimes I have to look at you and go, damn, that guy won't stop. Like, sometimes I want you to take a break just so I don't look so lazy. It's not about you. It's about me. Stop making me look lazy, will you?
Thanks.
So Reece, I congratulate you, man. All the best.
Thank you. I appreciate it. For now, this is Michael Liebowitz signing off from the Rational Egoists. Remember, like, share, subscribe, and join us next time. Thank you.